mwabonye abatumire dufise.
You've seen the guests we have.
Ariko turafise abatumire badasanzwe baje par surprise.
We have other special guests who came by surprise.
Mbere yuko nakira uza kutubwira mu by'ubuhinga ibijanye n'ibyo gukomereka mu mitima.
Before receiving the specialist,
batibiteka muri kino kibanza.
We've been honored
bana n'abashitsi bavuye kure.
To be with guests come from far.
Bavuye muri Leta Zunze Ubumwe za Amerika.
They come from United States.
Abo hari ico duhuriye ko ari ikintu je ku buzima bwanje cyamfashije mu bantu bashoboje kumfasha kubandanya mu bihigo naciyemo mu buzima harimo umwe mu nshuti zabo bantu bari ngaho muri kino kibanza.
Personally, there is something that link us because there's someone who has been so much of great support for me.
Ashaka kuvuga yuko niba muzi muri kahise k'isari abantu bagira impact munagize impact mu buzima bwanje akafasha kurengana ahantu hagoye ukutagira ivyizigiro n'umuntu akomeye yabahe muri kahise k'isi yitwa Docteur Myles Munroe.
You know, on earth we have different people who have been impacting our lives, but one of them is Docteur Myles Munroe.
Jewe narabuze umuvyeyi mu gihe c'amagume.
I lost my father.
I
don't even know where is his tomb. But I've come through it. Now I can do what I'm doing now. I've been through many different times. But one of the accidents that I used to fear was not to have hope for future.
Rero uwo muntu Dr. Myles Munroe yari impacts ubuzima bwanje mu kumfasha kugira intumbero y'ubuzima no gushogira ivyizigiro byo gukora ibindi kandi akora uyu munsi.
So Dr. Myles Munroe helped me to have direction for my life and to do things I'm doing now.
Inyuma yo kubura umuvyeyi papa.
After losing my father.
Umuvyeyi wanje yari yankurikiranye mu vy'ibatisimu nk'umuntu yakuze muri Katolika, umusenyeri nawe nyene yapfuye mu buryo
there's another parent who helped me spiritually. He was in Catholic church and he also died.
Abo barambabaje cyane ariko rero n'igihe Dr. Myles Munroe namubona ngaha hanyuma igihe cyaho kumva ngo yapfuye itavye Imana byarakreye shock mu buzima bwanje.
But even when Dr. Myles Munroe, when I heard that he died, it was a shock in my life.
Rero nari kure je nari ngaha narabimenye uwo munsi biba.
So I knew it when it happened.
Nagomba ndabereke gato imusogo minota nk'umunota umwe aka video nabonye muri uwo mwanya akacakara gira shock arakira shock ko sinumva ingene ibyo bintu byashitse imbere ko tubandana.
Let me just show you a small video that I saw and it created a shock in my life.
Good afternoon. It's good to see so many familiar faces. I'm glad everyone came. I hope the conference has been a blessing to everyone, in spite of, obviously. I just have a statement that I want to read on behalf of myself and my family. I would like to take this time to address all of you here and everyone around the world that has shown their support and expressed their condolences during this difficult time. I want you all to know that in spite of the recent tragedy that claimed the lives of my parents, Dr. Myles and Ruth Munroe, my uncle, Dr. Richard Pinder, our chief pilot, Captain Stanley Thurston, our first officer, Karen Cooper, our youth pastors, Lavard and Riddell Parks, their son, Johannan Parks, and their unborn child, and our dear friend, Diego Santiago. We all have comfort in knowing that God is in control. I know there are many questions as to how or why something like this would be allowed to happen to such great individuals, but still, God is in control. The past few days have been the most difficult times for my sister and I, my family, and all of those affected by this loss. We are all saddened by this tragic event, but we are comforted and encouraged by the outpouring of love and support we've received from everyone around the country and from those around the world at large. I want to thank everyone that has called, that has emailed, that has messaged, or that has just gave words of encouragement. We are truly grateful. I would like to make it known that although we are grieving our losses and are deeply saddened by this tragic event,
umuryango wa Dr. Myles Munroe, umuhungu wiwe n'umukobwa wiwe.
This was the family of Dr. Myles Munroe, his son and his daughter.
Bahuye n'isanganya ry'indege, madam.
He had an accident, a plane crash,
n'abandi benshi.
and he died with his wife and other.
Rero ntivyari vyoroshe kujera.
So it wasn't easy for me.
Ariko abantu barashoboye guhagarara mu bihe nk'ibi.
But people stood up in this time.
Ndashaka rero naho mutari muvyiteze.
So even though help me to receive the one you saw in the video, the daughter of Dr. Myles Munroe and her husband. Let's clap for them as they come.
Karibu.
Welcome. Welcome.
Turagerageza gukoresha indimi zose.
We try to use all the languages.
Muratwihangana nibaza yuko tuza kugerageza gufashanya.
You bear with us. We'll try to help one another.
Ndabana mvuga mu Kirundi mugabo mwe muravuga mu Congereza nta kibazo.
So I will speak in Kirundi, but you be free to speak in English, no problem.
Hope so. It's the only language I know.
Ngo nigoro rurimi rwonyene azi mu Mwongereza volume ya microphone. Mutwibwira gatoyi, just une petite just short presentation. Who are you? Where you come from? Why are you here?
Tugira uriwe ahuva.
Before I get started, I'm not the star of the show.
Okay.
Mbere yuko ntangura,
Whoever those two singers were,
Wow.
I understand your son and your daughter, they were amazing. They deserve a round of applause. They were amazing.
Atange gushimira cyane abaririmbyi baririmbye hano nibo ba star muri umunsi mukuru babikoze neza cyane.
I was very impressed by the songs they sang and the voice and the
naryohewe
talent.
cyane n'indirimbo baririmbye n'amajwi yabo.
My husband and I enjoy
Twaryohewe
that.
je n'umufasha wanje.
And it's so good that that talent actually comes from a place where a lot of people, the rest of the world, don't know that Africa has that talent or that the Bahamas has that talent. They think everything comes from the West.
Abarundi bafise izo ngabire.
They think everything comes from America.
Bazi yuko ibintu byose biva muri Amerika.
That's not true.
Muga sivyo.
And Burundi is proving them wrong.
Kandi Burundi tugenda tubereka ko atari vyo.
So I'm Charissa Munroe Wilborn, and as you know, I am the daughter of the late Dr. Myles and Ruth Munroe.
Umukobwa w'umuhisi Dr. Myles
And
Munroe.
it is a pleasure to be here in your hometown. I've been here twice,
Umunezero kuba
so I'm
mu
no
gihugu
longer a
cyanyu.
visitor.
Igihe
It is good
kirekire
to
ni
be
rya
home.
kabiri. Biraryoshe kuba muhira.
I currently serve as the president of the Myles and Ruth Munroe Foundation,
Nsanzwe ndongoye ishirahamwe
the
rya Myles
vice
Munroe
president
Foundation.
of Munroe Global,
Kukira
which is my
Munroe Group.
former international company that my brother and I still run.
N'ishirahamwe international.
And then I'm CEO and president of my own company, which is a training and development brand.
Sorry.
I'm the president of my company, which is a training and development company where my heart and passion is to develop
Nsanzwe ndongoye n'irindi shirahamwe aho ry'iwanje bwite.
Joined here with my handsome husband, Destry Wilborn.
Ndi kumwe n'umushinga nawe wanje mwiza cyane.
And it is a pleasure to be here.
Kandi n'umunezero kuba hano.
You can say something. Just introduce yourself also. How did you meet? Give us some.
Tubwire ngene mwahuye.
That's a long story. We'd be here all night.
Ni inkuru ndende.
But ironically, she being from the Bahamas, being from America,
ava muri Bahamas nkava muri Amerika.
We actually met in Namibia in 2018.
Twahuriye muri Libi muri 2018.
Maybe one day we'll give you the long story, but that's for sure.
Ni inkuru ndende.
But again, I'm Dexter. I am, I guess my biggest accolade is I am her husband. Maybe she's my wife. Maybe that's a bigger accolade. I don't know. But I am by profession a homicide detective with the Chicago Police Department.
Asanzwe ari mu bijanye no mu gucungira umutekano muri police mu department ya police muri Chicago mu gisagara kimwe muri Chicago.
But I also run a NGO called Men of Purpose.
Abafise ishirahamwe ndongo ryitwa abagabo bafise intumbero.
Journey to Self-Discovery.
Tugerageza kubazana kwimenya kumenya ingene boshobora kugira ico bakoze.
It is essentially a mentorship organization for young men starting at the age of 10.
Tukaba dutangura gufasha abakiri bato cyane kuva ku myaka 10 abahungu kugira ngo bashobore kuba abagabo bafise intumbero. Why did you start that NGO, that ministry?
Kweki mwatanguye ico gikorwa?
Well, that could be a long story too, but here's the thing. Working as a homicide detective, I just began to see a trend that all of my victims looked like me.
Okay.
And one day I was at a park and I was watching a young man, no more than 9 years old. As I watched his behaviors and mannerisms and attitudes and the foul language that he was using and the behavior that he was displaying, I realized everything that he knows, someone taught him this. If he learned this behavior, then he can unlearn this behavior and be taught something new. So I was watching that young boy at that park that day that I said something needs to happen.
Okay, and then until now, what do you see like as a result what you are doing? Do you have a program, start program in Burundi?
Right. Yes, I have a program in Chicago with about 25 to 30 young men. We have another chapter here in Burundi, and I always butcher the name, but Kaburwanta. Where we have 50 young men in the program, teaching them to develop their gifts so we can serve that to the world.
Thank you so much. Now, maybe I'm going to go back to you sometimes, but I want to go back to the theme or topic of today. It's not easy. It was not easy for myself to know what happened. The day of the crash, because I had someone who really communicated to us like some few hours later and tell us what happened. I spent with your dad like maximum maybe 15 minutes in my life, except to follow him on TV and learn from the video. And how did you manage to just want to know what happened the day you knew that the crash happened and your dad and your mom passed away and other people you know. How did you react to that?
So on that, I don't necessarily ever go into details because it's just not one of those events that I need to give details to. But it was very hard. It was very hard to believe for many years, even to this day. Sometimes something would happen. I would see something. I would be doing something that we did before. I would be somewhere where we've been. There's a milestone going on in my life, and I'm like, unbelievable. Like one day I'll wake up. To this day, I still say that. And it was very unbelievable for my brother and I both to believe that they were both gone. It took us a while. Because there were a few other planes going on in the air at the same time. So there was the first, news that it was another plane. So of course you don't want anybody to crash. It was a little relief that okay. Make a long story short, turns out it was not that. Their plane was my parents' plane. And interestingly enough, that day that was going to be the first day of the November leadership conference that my dad has every year. But he was having it on another island than usual. So, like the disciples who send the boy before Jesus to get the donkey, we went before him. And prepared the way. We were planning, my brother and I were already on that island. For about, I want to say 2-3 days before. Planning and preparing for he and my mom and some delegates coming. So that day that he was coming, which was a Sunday, was the day of the first night. And he was coming from church on his home island, so he was literally coming right at time to start. And we were just waiting, just there waiting. We were still muddling around and waiting. And he never came. And but the event still continued because my dad did a very good job developing leaders. He did a very good job creating a team. He did a very good job creating a team of leaders. If I'm not here, life still goes on. If I'm not here, work still needs to be done. So it was hard. For this happened on a Sunday. Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. My brother and I, we were isolated in a room. I didn't want to see anyone. We just didn't want to be bothered. My aunt, because my uncle was also on the plane. That's my dad's brother-in-law. So my dad is the president, he was the vice president. My dad was the senior pastor, he was the fellowship pastor. So my aunt was also there, her kids, my cousin was there, so we all just isolated for a few days in the room. But it turns out that there was also in the news that I was a part of this 9 that had died as well. So that was going around in the global news. But that wasn't the case. So they needed to renege or rescind that information. But the best way for them to have fixed that was for the world to see me. So that's when that, let me think. I want to say that's when that happened. Yes.
That was the first time.
That was the first time that my brother and I made a physical appearance after everything happened. And it was strategic because once the world saw me, whether I talked or not, once they saw me, then they would know that the news they heard before was not true. But that was a very hard day. As I look at it again, I remember what I was feeling. Like I just wanted to burst, but I couldn't. I knew my brother wanted to burst, but he couldn't. And I remember when we left the stage, and we walked in the back. Like imagine us leaving and going through this curtain outside. As soon as we got outside, we just burst. We just busted. But that day started what would be a forever living for the people.
rero ivyo vyatumye
Just
tubera
like my
abantu
dad lived for the people.
nkuko na papa wacu yabereyeho abandi.
So grieving for me was very different.
rero kubabara canke agahinda kuri
It
jewe
was
vyari
also very
bitandukanye
interesting
Yeah.
kandi vyari biri intéressant
because I couldn't grieve like the textbook.
sinashobora kubabara
There was no book for me to follow.
Yeah.
There was no
nta
process
gitabo
for me to
nakurikiza
follow.
nta uko bikorwa nakurikiza.
And I'm a social worker by profession.
mu vyo nsanzwe nkora
So I
nsanzwe
work with trauma
travail
patients.
social
I work with patients who are depressed.
nkorana
I
n'abantu bari
work with patients
deprime
who are in denial.
nkorana
I
n'abantu
work with clients
batawe
who are anxious.
nkorana
I
n'abantu
work with
bababaye
people who are victims of severe trauma and crisis.
nkorana
Like, that's what I
n'abantu
do.
bari victime y'ibintu bikomeye
And no matter how much I'm able to help them
naco
go
bitwaye
through their issues
naco bitwaye ko ndabafasha
based
kugira
on
bace
what
mu
I
ngorane
learned in the
zabo
textbook, I could not apply that to my own life
ntivyakunda ko ndabisoma genre
because I had to live for the people.
ntore solution.
And that's why it's very difficult for me to tell you how to deal with your trauma.
Rero bituma bigoye ko nobabwira ingene uca mu ngorane zawe
I will be doing you an injustice
noba ndiko
to tell you
ndabarenganya
follow these steps
ukubwira ngo kurikiza
when you're going through
intambuko
crises
mu gihe uri muri izo ngorane
because your trauma
kuko uba uri
is
traumatisme
different from mine.
traumatisme yawe iratandukanye
Your
n'iyiwanje
crisis, believe you me, is different from mine.
ingorane zawe ziratandukanye n'iziwanje
Because my trauma was convoluted, like it was complex. So I lost a mother,
jewe
I
natakaje
lost a
mama
father,
ntakaza
I
papa
lost the very next best thing to my dad, which would have been my uncle.
ntakaza n'umu oncle wanje yari umuntu akomeye cyane kuri
I
papa wanje
lost two very good friends of mine, the pilot
ntakaza
and
n'abagenzi
co-pilot.
babiri banje bakomeye bari kumwe
And then I lost our youth pastor, who I was
ntakaza
also very
n'umupasiteri
good
wacu
friends with,
w'ugwaruka nawe nyene
and his
yararimo
wife. So I
Umugore
have
wiwe.
relationships with these people,
abantu twari dufitanye imigenderanire
which means as a normal person, I should be able to grieve them one by one.
nk'umuntu asanzwe nategerezwa
Individually.
kubaririra bose umwe umwe
I don't know how to do that.
Yeah.
sinzi ingene bigenda
Your dad had been preaching the gospel and preaching to believe in God and everything. Did sometimes felt like there's no God, or just say I don't understand why
No.
God did
mbega
this.
warageze ahantu mva umengo nta mana ihari
I never
canke
felt that way. I never felt that there was no God.
sinigeze nibaza ko ata mana
It
ihari
wasn't until this year, it wasn't until last year
gushika mu mwaka uheze
that I never felt that there wasn't a God.
sinigeze numva ko ata mana ihari
I never blamed God either.
Okay.
sinigeze nshavurira
But
n'imana
last year, I was able to identify
mu mwaka uheze
that even to this day, I'm very angry at God.
niho nagiye gutahura ko gushika n'uno munsi nkishavuriye imana
But even that anger, on the flip, like it's like a quarter, like or a coin,
Yeah.
heads on one side, tail on one side, or that very same coin, on one side is anger, and on the other side is joy and love
muga iryo shavu
for the
rimeze
exact same person.
rimeze nk'igiceri kiba
And that's
gifise
the
ibice bibiri
relationship that God and I
bitandukanye
have right now.
Yeah.
rero ndayishavuriye muga kandi nkongera
And I'm very
nkaryoherwa
aware of it.
rero ndabizi.
And then how about when you listen to your dad and then he was like saying that the most bad thing can happen to somebody is not death, but it's to live without purpose. Or the time he was saying that I'm now feeling empty, I've done the maximum I have to do and then I'm ready to die. How do you put together all this and say, is this way or how, which, are you feeling that maybe it should happen differently or maybe some years later, or that give you some sense of saying, thank God, even if it is.
ubifata gute iyo umse papa
Ego.
wariko aravuga yuko
Ego.
Ego.
Yes, that
Aravuze
brings
ikirundi mukamera mashika man. Ego.
those statements bring a level of comfort.
ayo majambo yavuze asa
Because
n'ukumenga arampumuriza
I'm reminded
ko ndatahura
that
ndibuka
my dad is one person who would have not have left this earth without being empty.
ko papa
Now,
wanje ari umuntu yategerezwa kuva
I'm a
ku isi
strong believer.
agaragara
That he still had a lot in him.
rero ndizera ko yari agifise ibintu byinshi muri we
But he definitely was empty. He didn't waste life. He didn't waste purpose. And he left so many of us to continue what he started. So I'm comforted that he and my uncle, my mom, like they all did great work while they were alive. And so that is what I hold on to. And the one thing that he taught me and taught the world that I remember right after the crash was a statement that he said, if you are still here and if you are still breathing, there is still something left for you to do. If you are still here and if you are still breathing, there is still something left for you to do. And that's when, because there's a part of the story that I always forget to tell. I was supposed to be on the plane with them. At the very last minute, plans changed. And so I just ended up going straight. And so now it makes sense to me why, because I really wanted to come with them. But now I understand why God saw differently. He left me here, very much alive, with all of my breathing, with all of my blood, with all of my faculties. So there's clearly something for me to do. That is the only thing that caused me to wake up every morning and not want to withdraw or isolate or hide under a rock.
Thank you so much. What can you tell somebody? There's someone who, because something that happened, or even less than that, but now stop everything, don't want to do nothing or to achieve his dream or something, because say, okay, I have lost everything, and then I don't care if I just go to drugs or kill myself. Can you tell to such person who's in this situation now be able to continue, to stand and continue and
again, like I said, it's very difficult to tell people how to heal. It also took me a while to heal or to start that process. But I realized very recently that the reason why I wasn't healing is because I didn't want to feel. And
come again. Sorry.
The reason why I wasn't healing is because I didn't want to feel. And you can't heal what you don't feel. Because trauma is pain. Trauma is worry. Trauma, like you can feel trauma. Whether it's physical, whether it's emotional, psychological. And if you don't allow yourself to go through, to feel, to cry, to hurt, you can't begin to heal it. And so the best thing that you can do for someone that I couldn't, like I always tell people, the best thing I could tell you is just look at my life. Look at me. I can't tell you to follow my steps. Because there's very well someone who could have started the healing process a lot sooner than I did. But I struggled. It took me 7 years to go back to my parents' house. 7 years.
7 years.
I couldn't do it.
How long now have been like
oh man, and I smile about it because I couldn't do it because it was just too much. That was December of last year. Just this December. So 9 months ago, I went home. I was ready to deal with the very thing I was running away from. Went home, took my husband, took my family, so I wasn't alone. I cried, went through what I had to go through,
ndaca mu byo nategeza gucamwo.
When I left, I was a different person. Like this person you see now was not the same person emotionally that I was 10 months ago. I became more open. I became more free. I became more happy. Now I'm just at a place where there's a lot more peace. So I'm able to, you know what, if you need to cry, Shirasi, cry. It's okay. You can get out of it. Because I thought that there was a lot of times where I didn't want to cry, I didn't want to go home, I didn't want to feel the pain. Because I always felt that once I start, I won't be able to stop, and no one is around me to help me. Until I learned and realized that I was lying to myself. You actually will get out of it. So, you know, if it's very difficult to tell someone who's going through trauma, you need to get over it. Or how long are you going to be here? Because life goes on. It's very difficult to do that. Usually people need to be heard. They need to be felt. They need to know that you are there. They need to go through their process. And everybody's process is different. Even if it means that they go through some of those negative reactions like drugs. But you hope, because sometimes the best way to help someone is to pray for them from a distance.
Yeah.
Everyone don't always want to talk. Like I didn't want to talk. I didn't want to talk. I didn't want to see a counselor. Mind you, I'm a counselor. I didn't want to see a counselor. I didn't want to see a psychiatrist. I didn't need to. When I was ready to deal with what I was going to deal with, then I was going to do it.
How long have you been married now?
2 years.
2 years. Now, yeah, now it's 2 years you are married and everything. What do you think, as her husband, what do you contribute to that healing? Do you have to be involved somehow, or you don't care? You just look like don't pay attention to that, or do you have to do something?
I think the most important thing is giving the person the space to heal at their pace. Right? But also I'm very conscious about it too. And so I knew personally that there were some things that she hadn't dealt with. But it wasn't up to me to tell her to deal with them. I had to give her the space and time to come to that understanding on her own. But I was also very conscious of how she felt about her parents. So I would be mindful not to play him that often in the house. Because I didn't want the voice to constantly remind her. So now that I know that she's better, we can watch a video of him together.
Yeah, okay.
Before I couldn't present that to her. Because to her point, she wasn't ready. She didn't want to feel. And interestingly enough, as she was talking, I was looking, because I wear this bracelet on my wrist that says it's okay not to be okay. And so sometimes we have to give the people that we love and care the space just not to be okay.
Yeah.
And so even it was a shock to me, even when we had gone back to the Bahamas in December, it was like, okay. Because she had talked herself, many times she was going to do it, never happened. But that particular time she was ready. She's ready. I'm just going to be there.
Yeah. Wow, thank you so much. Yeah, we don't have enough time. We keep it going and just go in details. But for now, can you just give us a message or the main message you give to the world today in your ministry, in what you are called to do now, what's the kind of message have you bring to different part of the world and in Burundi for the moment? What is the key message you are giving?
Like I said, my passion and my heart is actually that after my dad is developing leaders and developing leaders to be who they are, as imperfect as they are, but understanding that they are complete enough and they are ready enough and they are equipped enough and they are full enough to lead not only their own lives but other people by what they do, by what they say, by their gifts. I look at these two young singers, these three young singers earlier, and I just saw talent. And I saw the world just ready to be their stage. And them owning that and not listening to the negative naysayers that say you'll never make it out of Burundi. The word, you know, they actually explained to me that the first one was the Beyonce of Burundi. That says a lot if she really grabs onto that, because we know Beyonce is very big, well known, and the voice that I hear can very well be that. It's my job now to get her to believe that, man, I could be better than Beyonce. And then they're going to remember my name, whatever her name is. So they'll drop calling her Beyonce and just call her her name. Her identity. And as I think about the question you asked before about, you know, what I would tell anyone, individuals who are going through. Let me just leave it there. You're going through trauma, pain, crisis. We have all gone through for the last 2.5 years. I think the problem we have with individuals is we're always trying to figure out the how. How did this happen? Why did this happen to me? Like we always try and figure out the answer. We always trying to make it make sense in our mind. Imagine me trying to make the crash make sense in my mind. Me, all those people dying, how do I make that make sense? How do I gain understanding? And the best scripture that stands out for me, and I held on to this for a very long time, and to this day it still makes sense. Proverbs 3 verse 5 to 6, it says, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him and he will make your path straight. Our understanding, like God's thoughts, are way beyond our thoughts. And his ways are way beyond our ways. And it wasn't until I grabbed onto that, I started trying to figure out. Because I knew that my figuring out would always fall short. And you ask me these questions now, and I'm able to talk. I'm able to smile with no tears. If this was 5 years ago, if this was 3 years ago, if this was 6 years ago, I wouldn't be able to do it. I would be a basket case of hair. I would be giving different responses because I would be in a different place. That's why I would tell anyone, just watch my life, because trauma, healing is a process. And it's actually a lifelong process. There's never going to be a time when I'm healed from the trauma I went through of having my parents. But with God, I can grow through it. And I can use my process to change a life.
Let's clap for her.
Wow, it's really an honor and a privilege to have you. It's by the grace of God you are here. And thank you for what you are doing for Burundi and of purpose in Burundi and everything you are doing, not only for Burundi but for the rest of the world. It's good to hear that you call Burundi also your second home. Hopefully you have found a place where you can buy a house and come and sometimes.
You must thank my husband because before I met him, I didn't know about Burundi. Even though my dad came, I didn't know. And he had been doing work here before I met him, and then I met him, and here I am supporting him. This is me supporting him, really.
Oh.
Like he is the chief of Burundi. This is the star.
Can you give him just one what's the hopes you have, or what the hopes for Burundi? What do you see in the future?
I think the reality of it is, just as her dad's message always was, that every single person has a purpose. We're born on purpose, for a purpose, and with a purpose. But it is only in discovering that purpose that allows you to fully be you. Like there's this idea, like most of us, well, not except me, but many people go to jobs that they don't like, work with people that they can't stand, getting paid less than what they're worth, and they're miserable. But the reason the misery exists is because your gift is trapped on someone's job. So I think what I would like is for the young people of Burundi to understand, number one, because you're made in the image and likeness of God, you have purpose. Discover that purpose, whatever it is. Whether it's like I listen to the musicians, and I'm looking at these young cats. I'm like, oh, these boys got talent. I'm looking at the singers and I'm looking at the dancers. And I'm like, man, these are gifts. It have to be served to the world, because the reality of it is, I'm trying to answer it this way. I always say nothing you have is for yourself. Everything you have is designed to be given to someone else. And many young people have gifts and talents trapped on the inside of you. But Burundi is waiting for that gift. And you're holding your country up. So discover your gift, serve it to the world.
Thank you so much for your time, for accepting to come, and hope you are going to enjoy your stay in Burundi, and welcome back again. Thank you so much. Bless you. Wow, good set.
I said this a couple days ago, but many didn't hear. All right, so she's now pregnant, right? So we're having a baby.
Wow.
I'm trying to convince her to come back here and have the baby so it will be Burundian.
Thank you so much.
Let's clap for them. They are doing amazing work in the world.